Good day, everyone. My name is Pieter Gunst, and I'm delighted to be here today to shine the spotlight on Stacy Lettie, the Director of Legal Operations at Adtalem Global Education. I'm very excited to be here. Stacy is a no-nonsense legal ops professional with a really extensive background. So thank you so much, Stacy, for joining us here today.
It is my pleasure. Excited to be here.
So we're going to talk about a variety of topics, but I really want to learn first about your journey towards becoming the Director of Legal Ops at Adtalem. I know it's been very varied, and I would love to hear from you what that story has been.
So like a lot of legal ops people, I did not start here. I was a practicing attorney, an in-house attorney for about 23 years. But always really had a passion for things like efficiencies and process and technology. I'm a self-described data and technology geek. And about 15 years ago, I heard about this thing called legal operations and started to look into it and just decided to take a leap and stop practicing law. Spent a few years consulting and doing various contract jobs within different parts of the industry so that I could learn more about legal operations before finally settling into this role of Director of Legal Operations. So I sort of came up as legal operations was starting to grow and just was in the right place at the right time. So super happy and lucky to be where I'm at.
Do you recall when you first started to hear this come up? Like, because it was still pretty early, on the trajectory of legal operations. So you say, I heard about it. I'm curious if you recall where that signal started.
I went to like a networking thing in New York City. And there was going to be a speaker on something about processes and contracts. I can't remember what it was, but gosh, this is probably back in like 2007, 2008. I mean, it was a long time ago. And there was all of these people there. I mean, all being, maybe 20 people there. And they were all talking about this thing called legal operations. And I just looked at someone and I said, wait a second, you do that as a job? Like, this is actually something I can do. And so I started to look into it a little bit and stumbled upon Mary and the group in New York City who were starting this clock thing. And I was one of the fortunate attendees at that very, very first clock meeting in New York City. It seems like a million years ago, but I think it's only about 10.
Right. And now we're here today, and legal operations might still not be the most mature profession of professions by a far stretch. But tell me a bit on that journey then, and now today at Adtalem, what are the key responsibilities? What's on your mind day to day when you come into the office or the remote office these days?
Yeah, so there's really obvious things like paying bills and managing a budget. And of course, technology and what that role is. But there's a lot of really subtle things that I think as you progress in your career in legal operations, you realize that is, really also key to what you do. It's a very varied job. I think understanding processes and efficiencies and workload management and workflow management within the department is just as important, because if you sort of nail all those things, they are the foundation for how you build a really well-run, efficient legal department that works really, really smart. And I think that you as a legal operations director, even more, I think, than the general counsel, you should be developing this holistic view of your department. So you're sort of looking from the top down and really understanding how everything from staffing balance and vendor management and budget management and procurement management and contract management, how that's all working together and how they affect each other. Because they all connect. There is nothing on that clock circle that isn't interconnected. And when you adjust one thing, it changes another. So I think being the person that has that holistic view of sort of everything that's going into how this legal department runs and being able to advise your general counsel or your CLO is critical to how you work day to day.
I love this dichotomy of like maybe the general counsel as like this outwards facing, what are all the threats that the world is sending to us? And then legal ops inwards facing is the operation, like running in a way that can catch all of this and like throw it back to where it came from as needed, which is very interesting. So that sounds like—
someone once said to me, what is legal operations? And I said, legal operations is the business of running the law department. It's not the actual law, it's the business of it.
Well, as a trained legal professional myself, I know that these are sometimes very hard characters. So I think sometimes that means probably a lot of people hurting. I mean, it's a joke about lawyers, but generally that's hard. What are some of the key challenges that you're coming along like in your legal operations role? Are those mostly people-based?
No, I think that some of them are people-based, but I think a lot of them are things that we have no control over. So, right now, I think we're all facing this issue of every company in the world is tightening their budgets because we're anticipating what's going on around us in the economy. So that, of course, trickles down. It usually trickles down first to departments like legals that aren't considered revenue generating. So, so we really have the challenge of, okay, we have all of these strategic objectives or goals that we've set for ourselves in our department for the year. How do we do that when someone's cutting our budget? I think one of the other challenges is just the change management aspect of this job is enormously challenging. No matter what we're doing, whether it's putting out new outside counsel guidelines or creating an intake process from the department, no matter what we're doing, the majority of what we do is change management. And so we have to go to people who have been doing something the same way over and over and over, maybe for years. And we have to go to them and A, convince them to change, and B, train them to change, and C, keep on top of them to make sure they're continuing to do it the new way, not sliding back to the old way. And, when you have a department of 50, 60, 70 people, that becomes a full-time job, just managing the change management of the job.
Jokingly, in one of our previous conversations, we spoke about like how to save $1 million with Stacy Lettie as a tagline for this episode. And I was thinking about it over the weekend, like at a certain scale of organization, you really can lose a lot of money very fast by not, streamlining something or not giving a lot of attention to something else. And I'm wondering, you noted this idea of, look, there's a lot of belt tightening going on right now. That's just real. We hear a lot from legal departments. Indeed, they're under increased pressure. And so I think this question is more important now than ever, but it also applies generally. Like when you come in to an organization at the early stages, even if it's mature or young, what are some of the things where you can leverage what you have, where you can show some quick wins and maybe actually, if you're lucky, save $1 million?
I'm going to give you two examples, and the second one is how I saved $1 million for real. But the first thing that I think you need, there's two places where you can look for money savings quick wins. One is looking at your vendor contracts that are evergreen. And by vendor contracts, I don't necessarily mean your firms. I really mean things like, look to see whether your yearly subscriptions are being managed or whether they're just re-upping every year and someone's just writing a check because they don't know any better. So making sure that your department has really good handle, or your procurement department has a really good handle on what's out there that's auto renewing every year and someone's just writing a check. In my, in some larger companies, you could be, sending checks out for $500,000 a year that no one's ever using the software and it's sitting on the shelf. And I've actually seen that happen on more than one occasion. So that's usually one of the first places I go. The second place I go, which I think is probably the most common and the easiest for new legal operations people to digest it and to actually put into action, is looking at your billing guidelines and your billing system, if there is one, to see what you're paying for that you don't need to pay for. So I always give this example of coming into my current job and looking at our billing guidelines and taking a look and sort of spot auditing some of our larger outside counsel bills. And what I was finding was that two things were going on. Number one, we had this wonderful billing system that we were paying a lot of money for, and it wasn't flagging some of the places in our outside counsel guidelines that we say right up front, we're not paying for those things. And so one of the first things I did was I went through and spot checked some of our larger bills and did some searches on some of these key items. And I went back to my vendor and I said, listen, I don't know how, but I need to flag these things. And some of them I want to auto adjust down to 0. Some of them I want to auto adjust down to a different rate. And I really went through with a fine tooth comb and went through and set up my system in a way that matched my outside counsel guidelines. So example, this is the easiest example to do. We have vendors that we do, because we're all virtual, we do a lot of teleconferencing. And what I was finding was that a lot of times they were slipping these teleconference charges into our line item bills. And our outside counsel guideline says clearly we don't pay for that. So I was able to take that line, that particular charge and set up my system. So when it comes in, it auto adjusted down to 0. I don't have to review it. My reviewer doesn't have to change it. It happens automatically. We do the same thing with color copies. We only pay 10 cents a copy. So everything gets auto adjusted down. So that was one way that I did that. I also went through and again, spot checking some of the larger bills that came in. I found that we were paying for a lot of duplicate attorney fees, 2 attorneys attending a meeting, or an attorney charging us for something like uploading a document to a website that they're not supposed to be charging us for. And so I flagged that as well. And then I set up a report in my billing system to give to me every month to see what the total of these charges were, all the things that got rejected or sent back or auto adjusted down. And what I found was, after about 6 months of really closely overseeing this, and anything that got flagged, I reviewed before it went to our reviewers, we saved about $680,000 in the first 6 months. In the first year, we saved $1.5 million. And that is just stuff that we shouldn't be paying for. So that's how I saved $1 million.
That's so good. And I think, kind of fascinating to see how process improvements that, yes, they touch a lot of systems. There's a lot of legacy behavior and people and relationships, but that you were actually successful in year 1, right? In moving that needle, it's just kind of fantastic and a beautiful example of where it makes a very measurable difference.
And I also want to say that if you are a person who is in a new department that doesn't have a legal billing system yet, this is also a great example of why you need one. And this is a great way to build your business case. Everything that I just said, you could do using an Excel spreadsheet. You're reviewing the bills anyway. Make yourself an Excel spreadsheet that shows all of the line items that you sent back to your billing partners at your vendors. Keep track of these things and be reviewing the bills line by line. I have a policy in my department that anything that comes in over $5,000, sometimes over 10, depending on the firm, but in the beginning it was over $5,000. I reviewed every bill before it went to the attorney, not because I don't trust them, but because I wanted to see what was contained in there. And if you can keep track of those things and start sending them back and keep track of what you're sending, you can really easily, in a couple months, probably prove that you've saved enough over time And if you had a billing system that was doing this automatically, it would pay for itself over time.
What a fantastic thing to bring to a GC or a CEO in any company. I know I would be delighted. Stacy, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Really delightful to learn a bit about your journey so far. And this topic, I think it maybe lends itself to a future deeper conversation. It's certainly something that we could talk for an hour about. What I'll say is that billing guidelines is a piece that's been regularly shared in our community. And so we'll link in YouTube or wherever people are watching this right now to that material so they can also take a look at how that's being applied in some of the larger in-house departments and what these rules are. But I think I'd love to get back to you maybe for an hour sometime and talk about that, because that was very, very interesting. For now, I want to really thank you for spending your time with us today. This is super insightful.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Stacy.
Thank you.